I just want to tantalize you, especially the ladies on this one, because by looking at all three of the books, okay, so we're talking about mainly Answer to Job by C.G. Jung, but we're also talking about Edward Edinger's cheat sheet to Answer to Job, and we're talking about Edward Edinger's explanation of the 21 plates by William Blake about the Job story. Okay, and only by reading all three of these did I get this equivalency. But here's the equivalency. Are you ready for this? Yahweh equals unconscious, the unconscious. Yahweh equals the unconscious, equals the self, but the self without ego, okay, equals autism. This is the big red one. Equals autism equals narcissism. Okay. And so what Edinger was saying was the basic feature of the unconscious is that it needs to be seen. Okay. And so where do we have a narcissist right now who needs to be seen? You know, don't name, no names.
I was going to say an X or something.
Yeah. Does Twitter mean anything? Okay, so what Edinger says is the basic work of analysis is to pour attention into the unconscious so that it can be seen. Okay, so the basic work of analysis is to pour attention, P-O-U-R, pour attention, into the unconscious so that it can be seen, so that it knows it's being seen. The unconscious wants to be seen. Okay. But, and so for example, as it is seen, it is appeased. So, for example, a brand new baby, a brand newborn baby, all babies are basically autistic to begin with, okay, because they have no ego yet. And so they're little dictators, they're little kings and queens, they think they're in charge, right? And so a baby will cry if it needs something or it's uncomfortable, things aren't good, it'll just cry, right? But when you give it the attention it needs to solve its problem, then it's appeased and it stops crying, right? That's the most fundamental level of this. And so, but the unconscious comes through an outburst of blind, destructive rage, which are assuaged when they're seen. So it's very similar to narcissism. So infantile and child autism is a kind of extreme or pure example of the narcissistic syndrome. Okay, well, I never connected those things up before I read the three of these books together and started to see what he's talking about. So the reason...
Well, narcissists have rage underlying.
Sure, and little kids go into rage, right? Little kids go into rage when they're upset about something, right? And so, but what the ego brings to the God image is the ability for discernment, to understand that there has to be a different decision here. Like, when I have to go to the bathroom, I have to go in the toilet. I'm not just going to go in my diaper type thing, right? So autism is it's total preoccupation with one's inner center, the self, the God image. So they're revolving around an inner center. So the whirling motion that is so characteristic of autistic children is expressive of the fact that they are living completely within the confines of identity with the self. Okay, they're living entirely within this Yahweh type thing, which has everything in it.
Are
Right?
you saying autism? You're basically saying autism is the same as narcissism.
Right. That's what he's saying.
So, and you seem to want
And
preoccupation with what?
with the self, with just I'm the center of the universe. So he says children who are autistic tend to do this whirling motion. They're always spinning around type thing, and that's what Yahweh does in the Bible, or he runs into the whirlwind, right? and so it's so a child has to develop ego, and when they develop ego, they start to learn the difference between, they start to get ethics, okay? They fundamentally start to get ethics, okay? Because they know that they shouldn't bother mom at this point in the day, or whatever it is, gotta leave mom alone while she's cooking dinner type thing, right? And so this comes out then to be individuation. So as we develop, we develop ego, which is individuation, where we find what we are meant to be. And so you're stepping out of the anonymity of the cycle of nature and into the personal, unique fate. Okay, so you're not just a human that eats and cries when you're hungry and cries when you're wet, whatever it is, but you're learning that you are a unique individual, and you're no longer just in pure nature, and you have to make decisions. So then they start to become moral and ethical decisions, right? And so the problem is, when you have a problem, which is what Job did, how do you deal with that, and what does it mean? And so what I wanted to do was cut to the chase. This takes some thinking about, I know. I do want to read this one summation again. Okay, so this is the summation in Encounters with the Self, okay, which is about answer to Job. So it's in a letter that Jung wrote, and he says, the lesson of the Job story for modern man is described by Jung in his letter of June 30, 1956, to Alan Kochnick, who had asked for an answer to the problem of an unconscious, ignorant creator God, which is what Yahweh is and what Job is facing. But it's also what we're facing when we have a child who hasn't, a brand new child is, in effect, a creator God, and we have to teach it something, okay? So we've become participants in the divine life, and we have to assume a new responsibility vis-a-vis the continuation of the divine realization, which expresses itself in the task of our individuation. Individuation does not only mean that man has become truly human, as distinct from animal, but that he has become partially divine as well. This means practically that he becomes adult, responsible for his existence, knowing that he does not only depend on God, but that God also depends on man. Man's relation to God probably has to undergo a certain important change. Instead of the propitiating praise to an unpredictable king, or the child's prayer to a loving father, the responsible living and fulfilling of the divine will in us will be our form of worship of and commerce with God. His goodness means grace and light, and his dark side the terrible temptation of power. Although the divine incarnation is a cosmic and absolute event, it only manifests empirically in those relatively few individuals capable of enough consciousness to make ethical decisions, i.e., to decide for the good. Therefore, God can be called good only inasmuch as he is able to manifest his goodness in individuals. His moral quality depends upon individuals. This is why he incarnates. Individuation and individual existence are indispensable for the transformation of God the Creator. Wow. I mean, that's putting a responsibility on us. It's saying, we are manifesting what God intends. And if we do that badly, then there's a bad God.
I'm really curious to see if this is partly coming out of the Red Book, because this is a very highly developed idea.
Well, it started with the Red Book, there's no doubt, but this was written, but Answer to Job was written 40 years later.
But it had been in his mind, hadn't it? You said
He had been working on it for 40 years.
Just had completed, or was he like picking at it, writing it in bits, or just afraid to
No,
release it?
When he was 76 years old, it popped out. It just emerged.
Okay. So it's just been something that had been working.
I mean, in fact, he was a little sick, and it was like this. It was like this creative flow, like Nietzsche had.
Are you gonna post that? Really?
I'm going to post it.
Wonderful, because I think that's great. I love that.
It's really incredible.
Well, that brings the whole Job thing together, the whole book together.
It kind of does. But there's a lot of details to it. So Jung was, talking about all of religious study for the last 2,000 years, right? And so there's a lot of detail, but I'm trying to give you a big picture first here.
So this is from a letter?
This is a letter he wrote in
1957.
1956. June 30, 1956, to Leonid Kochnig. Okay, and you can find it in the Dropbox because it's in the volume 2 of the letters. It is volume 2 of the letters, page 312 in the footnote. It's a footnote on page 312.
Is it a framework?
It does. Jung's point is that what's the point of being God if you're not conscious of being God? You have to have conscious beings in order to manifest your consciousness. And so basically what he's saying is there's a little piece of God in each conscious being. Okay? We can't say that an animal that works on instinct solely is conscious, right? And so a baby that works on instinct and is crying and so on isn't conscious that it's even a being yet, right?